Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the channel. With me, I have the latest book by Peruvian writer Mario Vargas Llosa, Half a Century with Borges, published by Alfaguara this year. This book, as the back cover says, is a collection of articles, conferences, reviews. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in the initial part, titled Borges or the House of Toys, there are 3 pages written in verse, like a poem. Was it Vargas Llosa who wrote that? I believe that he wrote in prose only. Anyway, there's no limit to praise that wonderful Argentinian writer. Too intelligent to write novels, he was multiplied in impossible stories, perfect, cerebral, and cold like circles. The first chapter gives its title to the book. From the very beginning, Mr. Vargas Llosa expresses his admiration towards Borges, even though they cannot be more different. That's why perhaps I love Vargas Llosa so much, because he calls himself a novelist who is intoxicated by reality and fascinated by history. He covers politics and erotism, and those are topics that Borges despised or perhaps ignored. He continues with an interview in which Borges, among many witty things, gets surprised by the fact that there are people who know his works much better than he does. Perhaps some over-analysis. Vargas Llosa describes the lack of adornment that his apartment had, which contrasts with his genius. He also identifies himself with Borges's criticism towards nationalism, that you cannot love something and at the same time hate something. He calls himself an anarchist for whom politics is rather than a bore, something to bother. A really curious aspect of the analysis that Vargas Llosa conducts is that in Borges's prose, everything is precise and concise. Nothing is lacking. His stories are always short, are always precise. He despises those who attempt to write novels, who intend to say in 500 pages what they can in one phrase. After being offended, Vargas Llosa highlights that a novel is a cannibal genre, that everything can be a novel. Also, that precision stands out in Spanish because ours is a flowery language, so emotional but conceptually imprecise. So, in the middle of excess, Borges is precision. Another thing that grabbed my attention is that contrast, Jean-Paul Sartre versus Jorge Luis Borges, the writer who believes that he can change society and that he should change society, as opposed to the writer who is just in a fantasy world. Vargas Llosa criticized that aspect of Borges as well. However, he succumbed to his literary spell, betraying Sartre. When I was at university, when I saw that we Peruvian students had to limit ourselves to the theories that came from Europe and the United States, when we should limit ourselves to write about our country, while Europeans and Americans could deal with any country they wanted, I wondered why. Here, Mario Vargas Llosa identifies himself with Borges in the aspect that the latter went against that provincialism and he became a cosmopolitan man, highlighting the role that Latin American people in general and Latin American writers in particular had in the West, as we are part of the West. He dealt with topics from out of Argentina in a very easy way and really professional way. He even influenced others and he created a very own way of writing. Borges's style can only be achieved by Borges. Any other person who tried to imitate him is just a caricature. That exotism is accompanied by intellectual work. In his stories, you can find theology, philosophy, linguistics. However, something to criticize on him is that cultural ethnocentrism. For Borges, civilization is just Western, urban, and white. I am surprised by that criticism because Vargas Llosa portrays Indians and black people like savages, like inferior as well. However, it seems that for Borges that condition was ontological and natural, while for the Peruvian writer those are results of historical and social factors. So Indians and blacks can be redeemed. Well, if we continue with the negative aspect of Jorge Luis Borges, here it is stated that there is some contradiction between that so-called anarchism and the support to not one but two dictatorships in Argentina. Coming back to the positive aspect, I would have never imagined that Borges had written for a magazine aimed at housewives in Argentina, where he wrote opinions from philosophy to poetry, from history to religion, with such rigor as if he was written for professionals. That means that he believed in his readers in general and female readers in particular. And it also says a lot about the cultural level of Argentina at that time. To be honest, I was lost at times because I know so little about the history of Argentina and even less about Jorge Luis Borges himself. I have to admit that I have never read a story by his. However, a half a century with Borges has definitely convinced me of how interesting it would be to start to learn about Borges, his country, and his time. Mario Vargas Llosa is really, really objective, even though he admits that one can't be absolutely or totally objective. He admires him a lot, yet he doesn't close his eyes towards what is questionable. But he doesn't attack, he wants to understand both the writer and the man. A really recommendable book, whether you have read Jorge Luis Borges or, as in my case, you just know his name. Bye bye.